What's up, what's good, what's up? Thank you guys for coming by on this video. And if you want to see other Reddit stories like the one you're about to hear, catch us on Reddit Wednesdays on my Twitch channel. Do it every week. And also subscribe here for any other videos I may post like this. And if you have a story you want to see read by me and whatever guest I may have on, submit it to the Geek Elite Reddit thread. And we'll probably read it. We love to see stories written by y'all. But for now, just enjoy the story. Thank y'all. This is family issues.
Okay. Oh, the family one to be crazy.
Camper nomad involves narcissists, entitled people. Parents.
Oh, God.
Parents told my brother that he could take my house and I could just live in a camper in the backyard because I'm single and he has a wife and kids.
That sounds like favoritism.
This is very long, so be prepared. I'll warn everyone here that this is going to be very long. So long that I'm splitting it into 2 posts and including a TDLR for each. I also really don't care who believes this. It's just so crazy that I don't blame anyone who calls BS. I won't argue about it. But this happened to me. I also really don't care if anyone in my family sees this. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. But I'm also not going to reveal any details that clue anyone in who I am that doesn't already know me. I'm a single man in my early 30s. I've got a brother who's 29 and he's already got 4 kids now. He had his first at 22 and the second followed a year later. Then the third 2 years after that. And the fourth is the most recently born a couple months ago. His wife, my SIL, and I do not get along as she always likes to try and get a rise out of me by acting superior. Then turned into an extremely self-victimizing drama queen if I retaliate against her in any way. She can cry in an instant and can put on an extremely convincing show to get sympathy from just about anyone. My parents and brother absolutely adore her, even though they know exactly how she really is and just don't care. She's very good looking, I'll give her that, but she's so awful that I could never be attracted to her. She also refuses to get any sort of job, even though she has a college degree, and my mother willingly helps with the kids all day. So their finances are entirely dependent on my brother. This also means they can't afford to live anywhere but my parents' house. And privacy is a bit of an issue with all of them under one roof in a 3-bedroom house that was built in the 60s.
Damn, the 60s.
Growing up, my younger brother was also the obvious favorite. We're 3 years apart in age, but he developed a superiority complex because I was badly punished if I retaliated against his antics in any way back then. It was obvious my parents cared for him a lot more because he got the lion's share of everything unless people called them out on it, which did happen a fair bit by other members of the family, which is why my parents packed us all up and moved us about 150 miles away from them. So they generally would only see us on holidays since it was a 3-hour drive. My brother got physically abusive towards me on a number of occasions, flirted relentlessly with my first girlfriend to the point she broke up with me, and laughed at any misfortune I had.
Damn, that's fucked up.
And my parents just told me to suck it up whenever I was upset about it. I only got equal treatment when my parents wanted to keep up appearances. I admit it was rather funny to see the looks on their faces whenever they had to treat me equal to my brother on birthdays and Christmas because other people were present. We had relatives that were very nosy and loved gossiping drama. So my parents did their best to hide what was really going on and threatened to take all my stuff away if I didn't keep my mouth shut. If anything, it just made my parents celebrate more when I turned 18 and moved out because it meant they no longer had to provide for me. I wasn't even done with high school yet when I moved out, but couch surfing was far better than living with them. I was low contact ever since leaving home. They didn't even show up for my high school graduation, but I really didn't care. From that point on, I was usually only see my parents and brother on holidays like the rest of the family. The start of 2020 pandemic was not kind to me. I lost my job and couldn't renew my lease on my condo because my roommate also lost his job and neither of us could afford the place on unemployment money. It was a rented 2-bedroom condo that I really loved, As the lease was ending, my roommate left early to move back in with relatives, and I had to sell nearly all my stuff because I was soon going to be homeless if I didn't downsize to an extreme. I really shouldn't have rented a place that was so expensive, but I liked living the high life, until that life wasn't kind to me. And I realized I should have been living somewhere far cheaper so I have more money to fall back on. But I had a plan. I owned a truck simply for the fact that I've always loved trucks. So I found $1,000 camper in a good shape and put it on my trucks just so I could live out of it for a while. It was supposed to be temporary, but I ended up living out of it far longer than I ever thought. I originally was hoping to be able to live out a camper at my house where my brother and his family still resides as well. But when I asked my parents to let me stay for a while, they told me they had a full house and didn't want me there. Plus, we hadn't exactly gotten along in the past decade. They said they only agreed to let me park my camper there if I paid them what it cost to rent an apartment in my area. That was way too much to just park my camper. I was jobless and trying to save as much of my employment money as I could till I find a new job. I may as well be living in an apartment with that rent price they were asking. My parents called my camper an eyesore and told me to take a hike since we couldn't come to an agreement, and SIL thought it was absolutely hilarious. I had to live in a camper. My brother joined her in pointing at and mocking me while calling me a homeless bum. I parked my truck camper in a store parking lot to sleep on the first night that I had nowhere else to go. I felt scared out of my mind that someone might try to break in. Suffice to say, I didn't sleep well that night. There was nowhere else I could go, as any other relatives that owned houses were fairly away, and all my friends were all apartment people, and I was pretty attached to my area as well, so I didn't want to just leave. I had also had my mail forwarded to my friend's apartment. It was the only way I could still get my mail anymore. Finding a stable place to park was pretty difficult. I went to look around to try and find a similar job to my old one. It took months of living the nomadic camper life. It took months of living in a nomadic camper life. In that time, I had to deal with a lot. Everything from beggars and drug addicts to people demanding I leave because my camper was an eyesore. At one point, someone who told me to move claimed to be with an HOA. I wasn't even parked on the street with my house, and when I questioned what HOA, they got incredibly belligerent and threatened me. I moved my camper anyway just to avoid the trouble. In order to have a steady supply of electricity, I learned to use a long extension cord to plug in anywhere I could to recharge my camper's battery. This meant sneaking around and plugging it into outside outlets of random buildings while parked on the street. I know that's a crummy thing to do, but I had to keep my batteries charged so my refrigerator would stay cold. I had a small solar power bank for recharging my phone, but I didn't have anything like a generator. And generators are noisy and require fuel anyway, so I did what I had to do. After a month of living like that, I finally managed to get a new job. I had to move to a neighboring city to find the job that didn't involve retail. I worked retail while in college and promised myself never again. Me too, bro. I worked retail. Um, Though I was nearly ready to break that promise. I was still getting unemployment money, but I had no stable place to live while receiving it. And I didn't want to still be jobless when it ran out. Plus, I was bored out of my mind. I had little else to do but read, watch movies on a small portable DVD player, use my phone or laptop, and keep note of where I could park and what local public bathrooms I could use. I kind of envied that the Japanese had public bathhouses. We could really use that stuff like that over here. When I finally landed a new job, I practically lived in the back lot of a building by the warehouse in an old employee parking space. Literally no one else seemed to bother using because they were so far in the back that the area was borderline forgotten. My boss owner actually liked this arrangement because I was willingly available to take any shift I could get, so long as I had enough sleep. He even let me take the camper off of the truck and set it up in one of the spaces so I could drive around without it. Thank you, boss. Not exactly sure if this was legal, but no one bothered us about it. The entire time I lived back there, I didn't have to deal with many trespassers. There were few, but the security guard sorted them out. I was pretty much on call almost all the time when they needed me, and was working virtually every day of the week. My boss let me plug my camper into the building for power and water, and I paid a small amount of rent by working for free on Sundays when no one else was in the office but the janitor and security guard. Beyond that, I usually had to shower at my friend's apartment or at my local gym as a camper didn't have a shower in it and only a portable toilet. And I didn't want to fill it because emptying it is a nasty chore. So I used other bathrooms as often as I could. Had a key to the warehouse and could go in and use the bathroom there at any hour. I was even on a first name basis with the night security guard. He's since become one of my closest friends. The camper was easy to heat in the winter with a small electric heater. Summers were not fun. The camper didn't have AC, so I had to get a usable portable air conditioner just to make it bearable. I made a lot of overtime pay and hands on learned some of the new skills from the other employees. Eventually, midway into this year, I landed a better position in the company as supervisor and started making a better salary than my old job. That's when I decided I wanted a house. The scare I gotten from losing my condo made me realize I need something much more stable for long term. I looked around for something close to my work and just 2 miles away from a 3 bedroom manufactured home on a small property, but I managed to get it for $10,000 less than the asking price somehow.
Damn,
I
that's
used
good.
hmm I used nearly my entire savings for a down payment and got approved for a home loan. I finally didn't have to live in a camper anymore. There was enough space for me to back my truck into in behind the house to take the camper off and set it in the backyard. So I put it there as its own little building just in case I want to use it again. When I was fully settled in the house, I was dumb enough to brag about it on my book of faces. The way he wrote that. My family saw the post, and that's where the shit really starts. After a few weeks, my parents and brother, along with his family, came to visit completely unannounced to have a tour of my home. I didn't even give them my address, so how they found out where I lived, I still don't know. None of them None of my friends had fessed up, and no prior family members visited me before that. So I wondered if they stalked me at work and followed me home or something. It really wouldn't surprise me. Once I opened the door, they practically all shoved their way in like a rambunctious tourist. Then just started making themselves at home. They all kept poking around, and SIL had this creepy smirk that she was repeatedly flashing me. And it was only later that I figured out why, and it made me madder than a bull on steroids that just got stung by a hornet. My parents were constantly talking about how I got so much extra space now, and it's too much for someone like me who has no wife and kids. Sure, not now, but maybe someday. That's in parentheses. And my brother kept remarking about how there was more space in our parents' house, and my house was closer to his job. Red flags all around, I know. Eventually, my brother asked me to speak privately. Everyone else suddenly left the room and piled out onto the front porch. That's what finally made me realize they planned something. My brother, let's call him Dan for the sake of simplicity, said the house was too much for me alone, and I should let him move in with his family because his wife is pregnant with kid number 4, and my house is much closer to his job. He pointed out that I already have the camper, so I could just live in that outside while they live in the main house. And I like to point out to Dan never once spoke of offering rent. Mind you, he's got a job. He also started talking about how there would be changes and even curfews, and that I couldn't just walk in at any time without prior notice. If it weren't
Oh, that just pissed me off. I ain't gonna lie, that just pissed me off.
if it weren't my brother, I think the person I was talking to had lost their minds. But Dan lost his marbles long ago thanks to our parents treating him like he was the center of the world. I tried to speak to him, but he kept talking over me as if I had no say in the matter. There was no way in hell I'd rent my house or parts of my house to him. Other people, maybe, just so I can pay the mortgage off more easily, but certainly not him or his nasty wife. Me neither. You ain't moving to my house.
I would have beat his ass.
In fact, he's not asking; he's telling.
Right, trying to demand it. Like, who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Who are you?
I've heard this exact kind of situation in videos online many times, and never once did I think I actually live it because I thought it was ludicrous. But my parents, brother, and SIL do all fit the bill for a bunch of narcissistic, entitled crazies. So I picked up my phone and set it to start recording, then just held on to it. Dan didn't seem to care or notice that I'd done this, and just sat there with his arms waving around while talking about all the reasons of why he needed my house. Then went from saying that to acting like it was a done deal and trying to reach out his hand to shake mine. That's when I finally showed my backbone and said hell no. And said it loud enough that Dan stumbled backwards for a second. I rather I rarely ever raised my voice to him on that level because I was punished by our parents whenever I did. But this was my house, not theirs. My spine can be as shiny as it wants to here. I stood up and then told him that my house was not up for grabs, and acting like I'll let him move in just because they want it won't make it happen. I bought my house for me, and it's not my fault he keeps having more kids and has to keep living with our parents because he can't afford to move out. Dan got as physically close to me as he could without actually touching me and said I didn't deserve the house and he needed a better place for his family to live. I laughed back in his face and said that was total bullshit because I work hard to be able to buy my house. Of course I deserved it. Dan started yelling that I have no kids, no wife, or kids if y'all say that one more fucking time.
I know.
And I don't need all the space, so I may as well give it to him. I said I'm not giving him anything, and he never even offered to pay me rent. If I let him move in, I still be covering the entire mortgage on my house without even being able to live in my house. Then Dan told me that he shouldn't have to pay rent because he's family, and family comes first.
But
just let it finish. I know. It's gonna piss you off even more. Just let it. And our parents said I was going to do this and that I will. Parents, you see, I'm becoming you. I'm about to talk in a bit too. I yelled as if their words were law or something and told Dan that they did not have the right or power to give my house to him. Then, right on cue, my parents and SIL barged back in through the front door and surrounded me, trying to force me to agree. There was a lot of fighting, but to sum it up, from this point on, I heard the line, just do it for Dan, way more times than I can remember. In the fight, I told them all they don't have to stay in my life or my house, and to get out before I call the cops. Sister-in-law screamed the loudest at me about how she was pregnant again, and I can't do this to her. I said I did nothing to her. She just assumed she could take from me like I would just allow it. I had no obligation to her or her family. Then I called her a stuck-up bitch who never had any respect for me. So I don't care what she thinks or how many kids she has. I have no sympathy for her. She won't be living in my house. Well, that made her angry enough to attack me. She got in one good hit on my face and tried to do more, but my brother held her back, kicking and screaming. She kept demanding he let her go so she can scratch my eyes out. The phone I was holding recorded pretty much everything, so I held it up and said I was going to call the police if they didn't leave right away. My parents told Dan they were leaving. Then my mother said that I had a week to come to my sentence. I told her I won't be, and not to come back. Then I told SIL that my phone was recording everything, and if she tries anything, I press charges for assault. She screamed at me and then stormed out loudly, crying with her face in her hands. My mother was the last one out the door and said that I better do this for Dan and SIL. I responded by telling her I won't be.
I'm glad that he stuck up to to all of them.
These people,
I can't stand that. I feel so bad for him. I don't like that family. Fuck that. No, bro.
I don't think anyone would like this family.
This shit pissed me off.
This is bullshit, bro.
They gonna try to tell him, oh yeah, we're gonna move into your house and we're gonna make you pay rent, but when you wanted to park your trailer outside of the house, we were gonna make you.
And then try to tell him you can live out in the camper. You can't come to the house whenever you want.
In his own house. In his own house.
Oh, and I'm not paying rent because we're family. When has that been anything to any of you?
Right. I'm not paying rent because we're family.
When I read this story before, it pissed me off.
No, that just pissed me off.
And SIL is no better.
No.
He found brother found his perfect wife because they're both assholes. And the parents, bro, how can you I never got parents like this. Who likes one child so much more than the other? I know postpartum can be tragic things for mothers and stuff and all sorts of things. But to blatantly be so favored
and so cruel to the other child.
Right.
Like what
it's
the
disgusting.
Child the child
and they know it's wrong.
To be there. Right.
And they know it's wrong because they're hiding it when other people are around. Mm-hmm. They say we're gonna punish you if you open your mouth.
For real.
So you know what you're doing.
And then it's like when he needed his family the most, they wasn't there for him. Still, even after he had moved out.
Yeah, still thinking about themselves.
For real. And then they gonna get mad at him when they needed him, and he said no. That's karma. You all had that coming for treating him the way you did.
And let me be so clear.
And then they don't see anything wrong about it.
They don't. They said, "Do it for me. I deserve it more because I have a wife and kids." You, Dan. Look at me. You chose to have a wife and 4 kids when you don't even have a place of your own.
Right. Why would you do that? Maybe worry about getting your life together before you start worrying about some pussy.
Saying he shouldn't have to pay for it, but a mortgage is still being paid off on the house. Just the fact that they showed up after he had a house, like after he was on a come up.
If I was him, I'd put a restraining order on all of them.
I would have beat the bitch's ass after she put her hands on me. I don't even care. Once you put your hands on me, dog, it's free for all. I'm sorry. It's free. If you touch me, I have the right to put my hands on you and defend myself.
I can be a bit of a crash out, so I don't think anyone will make it out that house alive.
I don't think anyone will be making it in my house. You don't shove your way in my house. You don't. You know what? If you came in my house, I'd be like, just wait here for a second. I got something in my drawer I want to show you. A home gift. A home gift. Look. How y'all like this?
A home gift.
Well, DJ, part 2 of this story.
Bet. I like this story. I love this one. This one's my favorite one now.
I'm not going to read the title because it spoils it.
Okay.
And I think the story should be like, it should be told to you.
Yeah.
As I stated in the first half of my post, many will find this unbelievable and long. Yes, I am aware there are similar sounding posts online already. I've seen a number of them now. But it's not like other posters have a monopoly of this sort of shit happening to them. If anything, I'm surprised this site hasn't been better weaponized against this sort of thing, since entitled people should be more afraid of getting out of here. But anyway, I do not blame anyone who calls bullshit. I would too if I was reading this. However, by reading this in my first post, you'll know just how messed up my parents are. As in my life, they were the root of all evil that spoiled my brother into the asshole he is today. And never once have they given me a real reason why. And I kind of fear there isn't one. Some people can't explain why they make choices like child favoritism. So it's all they can do to try and stand by the child they backed, which is exactly what my parents tried to do. I've practically destroyed their lives for it. Not in a legal sense, but more an emotional one. After I kicked out my parents, my brother and sister-in-law After I kicked my parents, brother, and sister-in-law out for trying to force me to hand over my new house to my brother, I immediately went to the social media and told the story to my whole family. It spread pretty fast, and you won't find it now because it got deleted some time ago. And I put my own profile on private. I posted about it because I knew that the first thing my family would do when they got home is try to twist the event to make me the villain. And I was exactly right. And I had about an hour to get started before them. And I have video evidence to back up my story about what they've done. No, I don't plan on showing the video here, so don't ask. Being preemptive worked because I got a fair number of family members on my side right away. My parents, brother, and sister-in-law must have been all set to write their post, but it was too late, so they didn't even bother trying to lie much. My parents, Dan, and sister-in-law had a few flying monkeys supporting them, but not much else. Plenty of others knew how entitled they were, so what happened was something they all quickly understood and accepted. There was one person in particular that called me. I don't know who they are, but they ranted at me that I was a horrible brother, and I needed to make way for a real family man. I just ended the call and blocked the number. This didn't repeat. It's an old school way of thinking, but Dan, most people would say that your brother is the real man for getting himself out of the slums into a house while you're living with your parents with 4 kids, but I'll digress. The week went by and my parents showed up with Dan at my front porch just like they said they would in their prior ultimatum. They rang my doorbell like crazy and also pounded on the door until I finally answered. I opened it just a crack and they tried to shove their way in again, but I installed a couple of latches chains that prevented it, and even braced my body against the door for good measure. My father and brother demanded I let them in, but I said I was recording everything on camera and would call the police if they tried to force their way in again. My mother calmed them down and then in her most sickly sweet tone asked me if I was ready to let my brother move in. I told her and the rest of them to fuck off and never come back. My mother put on crocodile tears and asked me why I can't just do this for Dan, because he's my beloved brother. I laughed and then bluntly said I do not love him as a brother because he treated me like shit for years and they only encouraged him to do so. They are terrible parents and he is a terrible brother. Dan told them to leave or I called the police ASAP. They all left surprisingly easy, apart from my mother, loud crying, and others giving me dirty looks. One could say making them leave was suspiciously easy. I thought the whole mess was over, but I guess I should have taken them more seriously because they had other stupid plans. I came home later that week on Friday evening to find a moving truck and my brother minivan parked in my driveway. It was Dan and his family there moving stuff in. He just waved at me with a shit-eating grin when I saw him. I was furious and told him and the rest of the family to stop, but sister-in-law smugly said to me that, like it or not, they were moving in. And then the most fake way, while tilting her head and puckering her lips, she said that it was okay because my mommy allowed it, and I should always listen to what my mommy tells me. I seethed with rage just hearing those words and looked at her smug, bitchy face. So, locked myself in my truck to call the cops right away. When they realized what I was doing, sister-in-law started pounding on my window and yelling at me to stop, and that I can't do this to her because she and Dan needs the house. And she cried, "Why can't you just do this for Dan?" I responded with, "Fuck Dan. It's my damn house, not his." Then she threatened to key the side of my truck unless I stopped calling the police. All which the 911 operator heard thanks to the window being slightly opened. I told SIL she damaged my truck, I sue her, and she was smart enough to retreat. When the police arrived, Dan and sister-in-law, along with their kids, had locked themselves in my house. I told cops what had happened, and as well as showing them my new driver's license that had my current address on it. Then, when we went to the front door, I saw that they changed the lock, and the old lock was laying on the porch with the center of it drilled out, and the drill they used was laying right next to it, with the complete Harbor Freight drill bit set. Could they have been any more stupid leaving evidence out like that? I pointed out the broken lock and drill and then gave the police a rundown on all the events that happened prior. Well, I guess Dan called our parents over at some point after I arrived, because they showed up while I was talking to the cops. My parents immediately lied and started saying that I agreed to rent my house to my brother and his family. I said that was easily provable lie one way or another. So Dan and sister-in-law finally came out of my house with some papers in hand. They both looked super smug, like they somehow outsmarted me. They actually drawn up and printed out a fake rental agreement.
That is going that far is insane.
But my signature was not on it. There was one, but it looked nothing like my handwriting. I don't think any of them have ever actually seen my signature, so that was incredibly stupid on their part. I told parents and Dan that was stupidly blatant fraud, and if the cops investigated, they easily figured that out. And I don't think going to jail in court would do them any good. It could even make Dan lose his job, which is his only means to provide for his family. I also said I would get a lawyer and sue for damages if anything of mine was lost or stolen or broken. And I called CBS too for good measure. Dan went white and looked really scared when I said all that. But my mother got between us and doubled down about how I should do this for Dan and live in the damn camper so they can finally have a family home to themselves. I yelled at her that if she thought it was such a good idea, she could do it for Dan herself and let Dan have her house to himself instead. The cops separated my mother from me, and I said, I want them all out right now, or I'll press charges. I stated in a shout about how they drilled out my front door lock to break in. The lease papers were obvious fake, and they badly forged my signature, and I have recorded video of sister-in-law attacking me. Those are felonies. I could fuck over their lives with it if I wanted. And if they didn't leave, that's exactly what I do. The only reason I hadn't already was for the sake of Dan's kids, so they have one chance to get the fuck out. The moment my parents heard that, I think it finally clicked that they cannot force me to do it for Dan. My mother surrendered and said she put an end to this. Then she went over to sister-in-law and spoke with her quietly for a minute while my father spoke to Dan. Sister-in-law instantly started loudly crying and ripping up the fake rental papers in tiny bits, tossing them like confetti, only to have the officer tell them to pick up the bits of paper or he's citing them for littering. Both of the cops at this point have that I don't get paid enough for this look on their faces. Dan had to start telling kids to load their stuff back into the moving truck. The kids were all crying, and the eldest was sobbing that he won't get his own room now. Sister-in-law and Dan gathered their kids up and tried and make one last pathetic attempt to guilt me with a sad family routine. You know, where they all gather together in sort of a group hug while facing one direction. I swear I think they practiced it beforehand. All the kids had the same pleading look with quivering mouths. Sil kept rubbing her pregnant belly and tilting her head to look like a sad puppy, and my brother just made the saddest face he possibly could and said, "Please don't do this. We need to be able to live here." But I didn't falter and told them to keep packing. All the kids in SIL turned to crying up to 11, and Danny yelled at me, "Are you satisfied with yourself? You denied us a home because you're too selfish to share and help out family."
Too selfish is crazy.
I ended up laughing like a maniac and retorting that what he was trying to do was taking, not sharing. And no amount of crying will make me let his family move in because he's no brother of mine anymore. He's just an entitled prick who thinks he can take whatever he wants from me like when we were kids. Dan started F-bombing me until the cops told him to cool it or he'd be in cuffs regardless if I wanted to press charges. He sucked in his lips and looked a mix of afraid and supremely pissed off. I asked the cops if they could stick around until my parents, brother, and SIL had all left, and they said they had no intentions of going anywhere until this had been resolved. In fact, in the next few minutes, 2 cops became 4 as more drove in for whatever reason. That gave my parents some extra incentive to get moving. I made Dan give me the keys to the new lock he put on my front door, though I got another lock the next day anyway because I didn't know if he had copies of the key or not. He was actually really reluctant to hand them over. Then, instead of handing them to me, he actually threw them down the street and into the storm drain while he was saying to go get them myself. But one of the cops scolded him for that and made him go get them. He had pulled off the grate just to get them, and he got pretty dirty in the process. When he got the keys back, he just grumbled, then slammed them down in my hand. I then told them all to leave and never come back. My mother said I'd be disowned for this, as if there was some kind of threat to me. And I voiced that to them. Then, overly sarcastically, I said something along the lines of, "Oh no, that means I won't get to come to any holidays with you guys where I'm always treated like shit by you all anyway, because Dan has always been your obvious favorite. You treated all me so badly when I was growing up that if Dan ever needed an organ donor, I wouldn't give him anything. So do you like always blah 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 words. So do like you always told me to do when I was mistreated by all of you and suck it up." My parents were floored after I said that, and the quartet of cops were looking pretty judgmental at them as well. I tell you, if you want to put nasty parents like mine on the spot, confront them in front of cops, because they likely not try anything really stupid. My mother just started crying and walked away. My father stood there looking like he wanted to hit me, and Dan just held his kids in defeat. Oh, and SIL was off having a tantrum in my front lawn. Soon enough, they all formed a line, handing out boxes and got their stuff out of my house. Nothing had been unpacked yet, so it was all taken out pretty quickly. But while doing it, my mother kept saying it wasn't too late, and I could still do it for Dan several times. Each time trying to bargain more and more tried to make me change my mind. She said that Dan could pay me rent if I let them stay, and when that didn't work, she said I can move back with them and let Dan rent my house so I wouldn't have to share the building. I told her to shut up and keep packing boxes. I don't want Dan or his family around. I don't want his money, and I certainly don't want to live with him or my parents ever again after the way they treated me when I was a kid. Making a deal with my parents would be like making a deal with the devil to me. SIL ended up having another tantrum after hearing that and threw a box down, and then sat on the ground to have a pity party because she didn't want to go back to sharing a house with my parents, and she just sat looking angry until everyone else was finished. She didn't even want to get up when it was time to leave. They finally got everything out of the house and into a truck, so before they left, I laid into my parents one last time about all the shit they put me through growing up. And with 4 cops being right there, they couldn't do much other than stand there and take it for once. I called them out on so many things that happened and even pointed out how they couldn't just do something nice for me, like letting me stay over with the camper when I was homeless and trying to get back on my feet. How they let Dan and SIL ridicule me and call me a bum. Well, who's the bum now? They want to kick me out of my own house so Dan could stay in free of charge. Yet when I needed a place to stay, they wanted to gouge me for more. Then I then I could afford just to park my camper when they knew I was out of a job. There was more extremely judgmental stares from the cops when I said all of that. So I put my parents on the spot one more time and asked them what I ever did other than being born to deserve being treated so badly. Because when I finally have a bit of success, they want to snatch it from me. For their favorite child, since they rather I give everything to Dan and have nothing for myself. I bought my house using the money that I earned. I owe them nothing, and I won't be asking anything from them ever again, because clearly I will never be anything more than a doormat or a cash cow in their eyes. I got no answers from them. They just stood there looking like fish out of water. So I continued to rant and ask them what in God's name made them think they were such good parents after all that. My father was beet red, but more from embarrassment than anger this time. And my mother was crying that she was a horrible person. I bluntly agreed that she was a horrible person. They all are, and I bet they'll go to hell for it too. They were shitty people and they all knew it. But if I call them out on this stuff in private instead of public, they just get mad at me and still act like I'm in the wrong. They on just kept on the denial for so long that it became part of who they are. My mother buried her face in my father's jacket to cry. My father looked more defeated than I ever seen him. Dan and his family avoided me entirely as they finished putting everything back in the moving truck. I made sure nothing of mine was stolen. Not that I had a chance to get much of furniture yet. I was lucky to even have a couch. They all got back in their vehicles, and SIL just stood staring at me with malicious. Punch this girl so hard in the face. Stared at me with malice until my brother finally got her to drive with the minivan home. And as soon as they were all gone, I got back online again and spilled the beans of what happened. My parents were too embarrassed to even try and defend their actions this time. And while the family was somewhat split before this incident, it was now a landslide in my favor. Nearly all the family has sided with me after this incident, and those who haven't simply aren't siding with them. Anybody. No matter how much my parents previously tried the "we did it for Dan" line, no one listened anymore. So, any remedial familial support they had is now gone. Many in the family who I expected wouldn't side with them did. That includes the former Flying Monkeys, so I guess they finally had enough. Around that time, I offered to host half the family at next Christmas Eve in my new house. My parents were not invited. I wasn't blocked on my brother and sister-in-law's profile, surprisingly, and I saw SIL had her fourth baby in early November. They are still living with my parents. I'm pretty sure they knew I was watching because SIL kept making passive-aggressive posts every couple of weeks or so about not having enough space while living with my parents. Probably to see if she can still guilt me. And I'm sure it's driving my mother and father up the wall because they aren't getting any peace and quiet in their old age. With 3 rowdy and noxious kids, a mentally unstable SIL, and my golden child brother, and a newborn baby in the house all at once. Perhaps they can move into a camper in their own backyard and let Dan take over their house completely. They might get some peace then. Yeah, they could do that for Dan.
That family got what they deserved. They got everything they deserved. That's that.
Yeah. One of my favorite stories.
That brother. They got everything they deserved. And the fact that
bro.
Seriously, the fact they tried to force themselves into his house.
Break in.
Yeah,
they broke off his locks, tried to put on new locks, trying to make it seem like he had a rental agreement. Yeah, I agreed to live in a camper in my own backyard while they live in my new house. Now I'm paying a mortgage on.
Right, like how much sense does that make? And then don't even get me started about that paper shit trying to forge his signature. That's crazy and super illegal. Breaking in his house and changing the locks was illegal too, but forging his signature, that's crazy.
I'm glad the cops are there so OP can finally let out his rant. So that he can finally lay in on them with the shit they did. Because, I agree with him. If it was in private, they would just make him seem like he's wrong. They're like, you should have just done it for Dan. What do you mean? Should have just done it for family. Like, even though we didn't do it for family, when you needed us.
Mm-hmm. They realized how in the wrong they was for everything they put bro through.
But this isn't why it's my favorite story. It's my fairest story because there's another update. Ooh, wee.
Damn.
Ooh, you ready? You ready, DJ? I don't think it's as long.
I'm ready. Yeah, fuck damn. You about to boom on him, bro. I'm playing. We don't fuck with Dan. He's the ops. Do not fuck
But that's
with
why
him.
I didn't read the title, because
We
it says they
boomed him.
broke my locks to move in while I wasn't home. I wanted that to be a surprise.
Cause they did. Like, that's so crazy to me, bro. Like, why? Like, did they realize that was illegal? Like, what are you doing, bro?
They did it for Dan. For a family man. For a man with wife and kids.
That couldn't get on his feet himself. That couldn't, like, what are you doing, Dan? Get your life together, bro. Get your life together. Now who's the bump? You Dan.
Okay.
Boom on, bro.
My parents, brother, and SIL showed up to Christmas at my house when they knew they were unwelcomed.
Just leave this man alone, bro.
Let him have some peace.
For real. Give him some peace and quiet.
I was trying to keep things to 2 posts, but I realized while compiling everything that part 2 was just too damn long, so I've divided things into part 3. For those who commented in the massive cameras, I will, when I can afford it. I'm still in financial recovery from buying a house last year, and as far as I know, good cameras need a decent computer to record it, and I don't have anything more than a 3-year-old laptop that runs Windows 10. Yes, I am aware of a doorbell cam. That will be the first kind I get. For those who kept saying that I should have just gotten my brother and SIO arrested, the only reason I didn't was because they are parents. Their kids need them. And if Dan was arrested, he'd likely lose his job, and without that, his family has no money. See, he's still... This family don't deserve it. And SIL has only months-old baby right now. Neither of them need to end up in jail. But you don't need jail for revenge. Police can help, yes. But I got payback without filing a police report. Would I be this merciful again? More than likely not, and they know it. I decided to wait on making an account and posting until after the new year, just in case more stuff happened, and it did. As previous readers know, my SIL was making passive-aggressive posts on social media that were obviously directed at me, especially after SIL had her 4th baby in November. She was posting the same repetitive nonsense over and over again. She just found semi-clever ways of rewording it, but she pretty much kept regurgitating that she was tired of living with my parents and there isn't enough space. She needs her own. She needs her own house, blah, 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 blah. I know I sound dismissive, but live through what I have with these people, and you be ready to sarcastically play tiny violins in front of them too. They're just that bad. And since I waited until January to make an account, more happened just like I thought. I stated before that I invited half of the family for Christmas Eve party at my house, and everyone I invited all came, even though it was a fairly long drive to around 3 or 4 hours for them. And they wanted to come and show me their support. I was praised by them a lot for how hard I worked to get the house on my own, and that they were sorry for everything I went through. I was asked why I didn't take my camper and drive 3 hours back to them, instead of living pretty much homeless for so long. And I had to sheepishly admit that I was very attached to living around here, and I had my best employment opportunities in this area. My hometown doesn't have a lot of great jobs opportunities in my field, if any at all, and I wanted to make my own way as much as I could, an answer they overall accepted. We moved on to having rather nice party, the best I've been in years. Some relatives even brought CDs of great Christmas albums, and I have to say that one of my uncles brought of Ray Charles was my favorite. He sings Christmas songs like no one else I've heard. It was a grand and happy time. I felt like for once I could just forget about my past issues and enjoy the moment. But I wouldn't be writing this if it had stayed that way. About 2 hours in the party, you know who showed up. My parents' brother and SIL popped in trying to look all smiles. They didn't even knock. Just walked right in my... Listen, hang on. Pause. Before we continue the story. Just so y'all know.
Entitled?
Just so you know, when you walk into someone's house without being invited in, that is free will for the person that owns that house to shoot your ass. I'm just letting you know that right now.
I would have boomed on it from the start.
It is free range when you trespass.
talking to
I
like that,
love
bro?
America. Because that's how that works.
Bro said, I love America.
Okay. Um, they didn't even knock, just walked right in the front door like they were meant to be there. I shut off the music and told them to leave immediately. They begged to stay and said they brought gifts. One of my uncles stood up and yelled at them before I got another chance to speak. And he said they don't deserve to be in my home, in my life after the shit they tried to pull months earlier.
500 donate.
And he, huh?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I was reading that.
Um, One of my and he said they don't deserve to be in my home or my life after the shit they tried to pull months earlier. They've been pulling this shit all his life. Just know that. And he was backed up by several other relatives. Mind you, this guy is my mother's brother, and he used to love her to pieces until he found out about the shit that went on between me and my parents. My grandparents, mother's parents, as old as they are, hurriedly got in between us and said to my parents that if they want to make amends with me, it's far too soon. Far too soon. I add that second far too soon.
Oh, shit, it was right to.
And they've never been more disappointed in them than they were this past year. They hidden their favoritism for my brother from prying eyes for a long time, but no one was fooled anymore, and they needed to make a serious effort to try and actually treat me like a son if they ever want to be in my life again. Then they turned to Dan and SIL and said they've seen a repetitive nonsense SIL keep posting about. They're tired of it and to just let it go already. My house will not become their new home. Sorry, I read ahead and you're about to be irritated.
Oh, no.
SIL went back to her old standard crying and had a pity party about how she should be the one living here and not me. She plopped down in a chair and had my... Hold up, bitch. You ain't sitting down. Get up. Get up. Why you sitting in my chair? She plopped down in my chair, have a tantrum, and said it wasn't fair I got this house to myself when I have no family of my own, and she has 4 kids that needs more space. I'm just gonna say this real quick.
Why are you still begging the
Right?
brother for that when you have a whole husband you should be complaining to? Tell him to get off his ass and do better.
And
he
also,
should be doing better.
And also,
come on now.
If you want a better life, it's really hard for a one-income household to have that kind of life that SI are looking for. Maybe after a little time after your child grows up, get a damn job.
Right.
Yeah.
Work that 9 to 5.
And just so y'all know, it's crazy to think about this, right? It's so crazy. When you have kids, you need more money.
Right, a lot
when
more
you have
money.
Kids, you have to spend more money.
Kids not cheap. Kids expensive as fuck. Expensive as a motherfucker.
And she just wanted a better and she just wanted a better place to live in and feel like a real mom. She was petty of me, but I loudly pointed out that she sucks as a mother because she lets my mother do most of the parenting while she sits on her butt all day drinking, playing on her phone, or going out and spending all the damn money. And she has the nerve to complain about it. I even joked that I'm surprised her baby doesn't get drunk off of her breast milk since she drinks so much booze. Which I admit went a bit too far as I got some stares. And SIL demanded to know if I was calling her a bad mom. I said the evidence speaks for itself. And if she wanted to be able to afford to move out of my parents' house someday, then she needs to put her college degree to some use and get a job and learn to save money.
Literally.
My mother already does most of the child care for my brother's kids anyway, so she have plenty of time after her baby gets a little older. My brother's eldest kid, who's 7 years old, ran up to start kicking and screaming. Little kid, I'll kick the shit out of you. Screaming at me for yelling at his mom. And he kept at me about his mom said that I was the bad guy who made her cry and didn't let them live here. That's when my brother grabbed his son and pulled him away. But all the other relatives jumped back in, and this was sort of turned into a family intervention against my SIL and brother. She was crying, her new baby was crying, her kids were crying. Hell, even Dan was nearly in tears from the verbal lashing he was being assaulted with. He ended up just sitting on the ottoman. I keep shoes in by the front door and looked like a complete wreck. He couldn't look anyone in the eye. He couldn't even say 2 words to me. Not with the whole house filled with angry people, ready to judge him if he tried to let out his inner golden child again. If they weren't there to get in his way, I bet this would have ended up a repeat of when he tried to order me around and tried to take my house months earlier. By this point, though, he'd been through thorough humiliation, that his and my parents' reputation in the family was completely destroyed because the masks were all off now. Soon after my parents, brother, and SIL all left in defeat, the party resumed and we all avoided speaking of what just happened for the rest of the evening. Since most of the adults had been drinking, everyone stayed the night in my house. I even let some of them sleep in the camper so there'd be enough space. This camper's still here, dog. I admit it makes a good guest house. My relatives all wanted a tour of it as early as well, and they said they couldn't believe I've been living in it for around 2 years. I got a lot of questions about it, like what summer and winters was like, and so on and so on. I was up earlier than everyone else Christmas morning and had a fresh bout of coffee and some ibuprofen for those spiked eggnog hangovers a few of them had. I was complimented on being a way nicer host than my parents ever were, and we all agreed to do this again next Christmas. After Christmas, SIL did finally stop making posts that were obviously digs at me, and deleted all the old ones as well. But shortly after the new year, she more recently made a new post complaining about how she tried to convince my parents to get a camper like I did, so it could be set up in the backyard so Dan and his family could use the whole house as their family home. Still on this shit. Well, a taste of one's own medicine is never fun because my parents turned that idea down venomously, I hear. No one is going to push them out of their own home, let alone their master bedroom. The post was only up for a couple of days before SIL removed it, and she had hardly posted anything since then. She loves to complain. Sorry, I was reading comments from Funko. I'm confused on what Funko's talking about.
I am 45.
SIL, I guess, has realized there's no point in doing it when no one hears her anymore. And Dan can't afford to move his family out on his salary alone anytime soon. If they ended up expecting another child in the next few years, I won't be surprised. Things mellowed down for me since then, and I've been invited friends over for poker night. I suck at poker because I can't even remember a damn thing about it. But so what? We get to drink beer and eat junk food while being merry idiots. We all loaded up on Whoppers from Burger King and just had at it in the best way four grown men can when they just want to have a good unadulterated time and get pissed drunk. I think maybe around summer I'll look into possibly dating someone. I'm not exactly getting younger here. Fingers crossed that goes well. My camper just sits idly in my yard now, and I'll admit there are some days I went out there just to spend time in it. I did live in it for 2 years. It was like my second home, and maybe one day I'll actually get to use it for camping, like it was meant to be. I've never been camping. My parents considered it a waste of time, so it's completely a new experience for me. This pretty much marks the end of what happened. My parents, brother, and sister-in-law have all been staying clear of me. In fact, they seem to have gone back to acting like I don't exist, like they did before I bought a house. Not like that bothers me at all. It's better that way. But they'll inevitably come back in some way. I know they will. I just wonder what kind of stupid thing they'll do next. If anything notable like this ever happens again, I'll make another post if this account is still active.
Well, how long ago was this?
This was a year ago.
Damn. That bro went through it.
This post was a year ago. The other shit was like months earlier, so. Yeah. Family sucks.
I don't understand why the family, like, why was they trying to, like, first off, she needed to get a job. Secondly, like, if the boyfriend or whatever was living with the parents and it all was, he had a job, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where was his money going?
Probably to a wife that wants a lot of money. That wants to spend a lot of money.
Like,
and 4 fucking kids.
But like, cause he didn't have to pay rent. I can understand the whole kids thing.
Yeah.
Cause it's his responsibility to feed his kids. But he still should have been saving up money.
He really should. I mean, OP did it living in a camper.
Literally, bro was homeless. He was homeless.
That's a crazy story, man.
That shit was wild.
I have to ask you something, though.
What's up?
Will you come back possibly next week or the week after? Because there's other updates of this story. I just
Of
don't
that
want,
one?
Yep. And I just don't want to
I'll
keep
come back. I
my
need
throat
those
sore.
updates.
But I think we should
I'll
save the
fix your
updates
throat.
for next week.
Hell yeah, I'll come back.
You come back? All right.